Hello, everybody. It's 2 o'clock. Welcome to this MECLA webinar and this briefing. My name is Hudson Worsley from Precinct. I'm the chair of MECLA, which I really enjoy. And yes, MECLA, the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance. If this is your first event, welcome. If you're a regular, welcome as well. We are all on Indigenous land. I'm joining you from Gadigal country of the Eora Nation and pay respect to elders past and present. I'd like to remind everybody of MECLA's governance framework. As you know, we are a pre-competition alliance. It's so important that we operate in a pre-competition space so that we can collaborate for the greater good. We must avoid conflicts of interest. So if you are aware of a conflict, please do raise your hand, but in a webinar setting, I doubt that's all that likely. Today is going to be a fascinating presentation, a briefing from the Australian Bim Advisory Board. There's some acronyms and technical language that will be explained by our speakers, but from a MECLA perspective, we're delighted to be engaged at this deeper level. The speakers have been doing a lot of work in consultation with the industry about the role of digitisation as it applies to decarbonisation. And obviously that's where MECLA comes in. So we'll very soon welcome Andrew Curthoys, the ABAB chair, and Teresa Scott, who is the executive director of APCC, Australian Procurement Construction Council. They're joined by Dominic Holani, also of APCC, who may also join us in a Q&A at the end. Look, today's really about why digitalisation, that's a difficult one, digitalisation matters. What are the challenges? What are the pathways forward? And then, importantly, and we'll come back to this at the end, feedback from us, the MECLA community. So, without taking up any more time, Teresa Scott, could I invite you to turn on your camera and to pick things up from here? Teresa, thanks for taking time. You're a friend of MECLA. We've done several things together in the past. It's great to have you sharing your work on this with our community. Can I hand over to you now?
Thank you, Hudson, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce the two organisations behind today's session and explain how their collaboration has led to the establishment of the Australian Bim Advisory Board, ABAB. So first of all, to APCC, so I am the Executive Director for the Australasian Procurement and Construction Council. It was established in 1967. It was created by government for government. APCC is the peak council, whose members are responsible for procurement, construction, and asset management policy and delivery for Australian state and territory governments, the Australian government, and the New Zealand government. Over the past 58 years, the work of APCC has been committed to procurement innovation, solutions, and efficiencies, designed all to create savings and maximise service delivery to the communities of Australia and New Zealand. So that is the APCC. We unfortunately can't have with us today the CEO, newly elected CEO of ACIF, the Australian Construction Industry Forum, but I will say a few words on their behalf. So ACIF is the meeting place for leaders across the Australian construction sector. ACIF brings together key players from residential and non-residential building, engineering, construction, and industry associations. Its members represent the full asset creation process, from feasibility and design through to construction, management, and operation. So you can see the alignment of APCC representing government and ACIF representing industry is a powerful alignment to enable change within the industry. So in 2027, ACIF and the APCC joined forces with NatSpec, Building Smart, Ausroads and Standards Australia to establish the ABAB. ABAB brings together government and industry in a true partnership. Our goal is clear: to provide leadership and coordination in the harmonised adoption of building information modelling, BIM or digital engineering across Australasia. Without such coordination, the risk was fragmentation, different protocols, guidelines and approaches being developed in isolation, leading to inefficiencies, wasted effort and higher costs. ABAB was created to address this risk. So instead, ABAB promotes and is supporting industry to adopt BIM in a consistent way that provides or improves productivity, enhances project outcomes, and maximises value for end users. At its core, ABAB is about harnessing collaboration to deliver smarter, more efficient and more sustainable digital enablement outcomes for the construction and infrastructure sectors, and ultimately for the economies and communities of Australasia. Today's webinar continues that spirit of collaboration. It is an important opportunity to collectively build the harmonised frameworks and practices that will guide the construction industry into the future. And with that, I again introduce my colleague Dominique Halani. She's the Construction Program Manager for both APCC and ABAB. Dominique is the driving force behind the work of these two groups, ensuring momentum, coordination and delivery across their programs. I also have the honour of introducing Andrew. He's the chair of ABAB. Andrew has served as chair for around 5 years, and under his leadership, ABAB has grown into the leading peak body for digital enablement in the built environment. So I now invite Andrew to present on digitalisation to decarbonisation, the draft ABAB paper. So over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Teresa. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. Hi, everyone. As Teresa outlined, I'm Andrew Curthoys, the chair of the Australian Bim Advisory Board. I just want to thank you all sincerely for investing your time today to hear ABAB's views on the value that digital can provide to the decarbonisation quest that we believe Australia and New Zealand governments must embrace in order to get to net zero. Thanks also to MECLA for the opportunity to present at this webinar and to consult, of course, with your membership. I think the really important element here is that we want to demonstrate that there's a role for BIM DE to provide leadership, to deliver consistency, which helps with certainty and leads to confidence. So in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. So today, in this esteemed group of thinkers, I want to discuss the ideas and value proposition that BIM can and must play in decarbonisation of our infrastructure delivery through digitalisation. And if there's one takeaway from today, it's simply this. You can't count carbon unless you have digital, and that is embedded in this draft position paper that ABAB has released for consultation. So I look forward to your considered views on that. All right, ABAB also acknowledges the traditional owners of the countries on which we are meeting today. So as you've heard, who or what is ABAB? It was started in 2017, as Teresa mentioned. We've got APCC and ASIV as the parent bodies. And then we've got Austroads, Building Smart, NatSpec, and Standards Australia. We lead industry and government collaboration throughout Australia and New Zealand, as Teresa mentioned, to ensure an integrated, consistent approach. ABAB has membership from all jurisdictions across Australia and New Zealand and is recognised as a leading whole of industry voice. But being key to being a leading voice is the importance of driving consistency so that industry and government have certainty around what I like to call the rules of racing, which leads to confidence to invest. ABAB commits to an integrated best practice approach, driving consistency at all levels of government and industry, particularly through procurement standards, protocols, systems, contracts, tools, and approaches, simply striving to achieve harmonisation and standardisation. ABAB provides best practice and promotes the adoption of best practice through a range of initiatives and forums. And we deliver a whole of industry voice, which is laying the foundations for digitalisation, which will be able to be used in identifying and capturing the carbon elements in this infrastructure. And this is, as we know, is needed to get Australia on the path to being net zero by 2050. There are some clear positions that ABAB builds upon from organisations such as Infrastructure Australia that have identified that digitalisation offers a powerful lever and opportunity to address some of the challenges around decarbonisation. Globally, digitalisation and technology are being employed in a range of different industries and sectors to improve project coordination, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with on the call today. However, the scale and speed of this digital transformation needed to achieve systemic decarbonisation, we believe, needs urgent attention. Australia and New Zealand face a pivotal opportunity to accelerate their transition to net zero emissions. But as you're probably all aware, many projects still lack a clear carbon baseline, consistent reporting frameworks, and integrated data environments. There's probably nothing new in some of the challenges the infrastructure and construction sector faces. The difference in this position paper is just calling out digital for the value that it offers to the sectors. And as I've said, if there's only one takeaway that you get today, it's simply this: you can't count carbon unless you have digital. So in ABAB's view, the case for digitalisation is fairly clear. Technologies such as building information modelling, digital twins, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the Internet of Things offer visibility, traceability, and predictive insight needed to manage carbon effectively. But it's also that cultural change piece that is needed within organisations to embed digital to provide more robust data on the carbon footprint and elements in the projects. So leadership is key, but also embracing data is key throughout the organisations. The Australian Bim Advisory Board has been instrumental in promoting this digital shift. Through cross-government and industry collaboration, ABAB has championed the use of building information modelling and structured information management as core enablers of low-carbon, high-performance asset delivery. Its ongoing leadership reinforces the need for consistent standards, aligned procurement practices, and widespread upskilling of project teams. The Digital by Default initiative led by Infrastructure Australia and of course supported by organisations such as ABAB, Control Australia, MECLA and others provides momentum by setting a national direction for digital integration across public infrastructure projects. Simply, you can't count carbon unless you have digital. Now, this figure outlines what we believe is the integration of digital elements and how they build on one another to deliver benefits across the sector. And my thanks to Jeremy Mansfield for his support in preparing this. As you can see, at the heart is the decarbonisation in construction across Australia and New Zealand. There are a whole range of elements which surround that, but of course there are elements which wrap around that, if you like, to ensure that there are incentives in place, there are pilot projects to demonstrate value, there needs to probably be a mandate, and there needs to be embedded digital carbon literacy. All this is going to be driven by data, automation, and carbon accountability and reporting. Across both Australia and New Zealand, there's a growing recognition that digitalisation plays a critical role in accelerating decarbonisation efforts. In Australia, a coalition of industry organisations has developed an implementation guide to improve traceability and digitalisation of construction product information across the supply chain. The National Building Products Coalition is working to ensure that key attributes such as embodied carbon, can be recorded, can be shared and verified in real time as materials move through the construction process. Digital tools and processes are especially valuable because they allow carbon impacts to be identified early before they are locked in through materials or design choices. And we believe at ABAB that this is critical. By embedding digital workflows across planning, procurement and construction and operation, both embodied and operational carbon can be systematically reduced through data-driven decision-making at all stages of an asset lifecycle. So that's why we believe that digital is so important, and that it has a key role to play in the decarbonisation processes around infrastructure and construction. There's a number of challenges that we've identified to adoption, but I want to ask this question of everybody today. Are these the right barriers or challenges, and what have we missed? So in terms of fragmented governance standards, I'm sure that you're all familiar with them. Australia's construction industry operates under varying state and territory level regulations, leading to challenges around inconsistency in the adoption of digital and sustainability standards. And this is not new. This has been called out for a number of years by organisations such as Infrastructure Australia, Standards Australia and others. But how do we encourage governments to get to a level of harmonisation around standards? What are some of the gaps that are involved in digital skills and the workforce gaps? Now, one of the significant barriers is the limited availability of digital and sustainability skills across the construction workforce, and in particular with small to medium enterprises. We're not going to fix all that with a position paper, but if we can identify it and call it out and encourage governments to invest in skills uplift and skills training, that will certainly assist in improving the workforce to understand the value proposition. Part of the challenge, of course, is for small and medium enterprises is that those participation and cost barriers. We've all heard of the high initial costs and unclear return on investment from digital investments that have occurred, and they certainly may deter some small and medium enterprises from adopting advanced technologies. So how do we address this? How do we make it viable for small and medium enterprises to participate? Do we set a time frame which is by 2027 or 2029 or some other time frame? This is where we want to get the majority of people in the infrastructure and construction sector to. And of course, data interoperability and privacy is key, and as well security. We've all had experiences of siloed project data, lack of common data environments, and concerns around cybersecurity, because these all hinder digital collaboration across the value chains. And of course, they don't provide confidence. And part of that, our challenge for the infrastructure sector and the construction sector is confidence in the approach, confidence in the data, confidence in the security, and confidence around some of the privacy elements as well. As well, we know that not all governments have the same level of maturity around procurement policy. We need to look at how we uplift procurement processes by sending clear policy signals that provide industry with requirements for accelerated emissions reduction through their planning processes, through their delivery, of course, into asset management, as outlined by the New South Wales Government's Sustainable Infrastructure Program. That's been key to addressing the carbon elements in a project's life cycle. And at ABAB, we don't believe it's just in the construction, design and construction of the project. Of course, it moves across the entire life cycle into the operations and maintenance. So how do we ensure that we get the right information to get the right outcomes throughout the entire life cycle of a project? And how do we ensure that government and industry understand that you can't count carbon unless you've got digital? Now, this is the challenge to adoption, I think, that and we don't have to boil the ocean as we start. We can start small, we can pilot, we can demonstrate the value proposition and how we can achieve the outcomes to the benefit of all. But we need to start. So ABAB's identified 4 key strategies that we believe will help in looking at and aligning digital to address the decarbonisation agenda that's going on. Obviously, a national digital built environment strategy would be key. And Australia and New Zealand would benefit from government coordinated strategies that align digital adoption and decarbonisation goals. This strategy should align data requirements with decarbonisation goals, promoting interoperability, because that'll be key, integration of standards for digital modelling, carbon accounting, and smart asset management. And this isn't something that ABAB has dreamed up. Infrastructure Australia has been talking and writing about this since 2021. But we can't just let it slip. We need to get onto our policymakers in governments to have a look and commit to a national digital built environment strategy. As well, carbon embedded digital models. Mandating carbon performance modelling in digital design tools such as BIM, or Building Information Modelling, for publicly funded infrastructure projects can ensure sustainable outcomes from the outset. Again, this isn't ABAB. Climate Works, who you're all probably familiar with, has been writing and discussing this since 2020. So this isn't something new, but it's something that's been identified and we need to take action on it. Open source and data platforms. Open data platforms can facilitate benchmarking, reduce duplication of effort, and encourage innovation, especially among the small and medium enterprises. Right? And this, again, isn't something that ABAB's just suddenly dreamt up. You know, the Global Infrastructure Hub has been discussing this since 2022. This is really important, that we look at how we can share data effectively, look at how we can ensure that people have access to it, and that they are aware of the value proposition. And then another one is the materials digital passports. Digital material passports and blockchain can track resources for reuse, improving waste recovery rates, and reducing embodied emissions. Again, this isn't new. This has been discussed for almost a decade. There are examples already underway where groups such as Prefab Oz and the Post Carbon Research Centre at RMIT are advocating ways to engage with governments to harmonise building codes, provide financial incentives, and integrate prefabrication into national housing strategies. But my question to you is, are there other strategies that need to be included? We don't want an exhaustive list which governments look at and go, it's all too hard. I think that the 4 key strategies we've identified, we could probably add in a 5th, but do we have it right? And I'll encourage you, when you get on to the MECLA webpage to do your feedback, to identify where the gaps might be, to identify what the opportunities might be, and please make suggestions. One of the things that we've tried to identify here in the paper too is how we can have some pathway steps. You know, some small steps that we can take to then move us from where we are to where I think we should be. Noting, of course, that this is not, there won't be an end point. We will need to keep taking small steps to get better outcomes. So we've identified some key pathway steps, and we've identified the following 5. One of the things we have to do around incentivising digital decarbonisation is look at the tax structure and the funding structure. can we expand funding for digital infrastructure and provide tax incentives for adopting low carbon digital technologies? Is this something that the government would embrace? Has to be at a national level, obviously, but there's an opportunity here that we need to have a conversation around. How do we embed digital carbon literacy across the value chain? Clearly, we've got to integrate digital carbon literacy and sustainability modules into construction and engineering curricula to build on the existing 136,000 people already in the workforce doing decarbonisation work in industry. But we want to grow that. We want to ensure that we've got more people who are understanding the decarbonisation challenge, who can have the conversations, who are willing to step forward and say, this is the value proposition that we can offer. We've also got to encourage life cycle carbon assessment with digital tools. And I think it could be 2029. Others think it could be sooner. I welcome your views on the timing, but I think one of those things we need to be looking at is having a time frame in there where we have life cycle assessment tools in place. These don't have to be new. These don't have to be new. They can certainly be tools that already exist and that we call up and recommend to governments or to industry to embrace and support. Full life cycle carbon assessments using standardized digital tools, ensuring alignment with climate targets in public infrastructure and construction need to be considered and addressed, in my view. I think we also have to invest in pilot projects and test beds. We need to partner between government and industry to create real-world test beds, showing the value proposition that digital decarbonisation offers and benefits across diverse infrastructure types. And this is really important because if without pilot projects, without test beds, it all becomes a bit esoteric, right? We've got to be able to point to the achievements. We've got to be able to point to the outcomes. We've got to be able to say with confidence, this is how it's worked. This is how it's been delivered. And here's the example. You can go and touch it. You can go and feel it. You can test it yourself and realize the benefits. And I think there are probably some co-developed solutions as well. Some co-developed solutions where academia are incorporating things like CRCs, cooperative research centres, and governments working with industry to develop commercial solutions and scale needs to be further examined. Right? I think that there's probably some really good work already embedded there, which we need to get out and focus or publish more effectively. But are there others? Right? Is there something that you are aware of that's completely missing from what we've identified? If so, please tell us in the feedback so that we can incorporate it. Now, the timing, of course, for all this is to try and get something in place, finish the consultation through September, aim for board endorsement in October, with a launch in November. So as you can see, we're coming right to the end of our consultation period. Board endorsement, we are anticipating should be straightforward once we can have demonstrated all the consultation we've undertaken and the value that we've delivered. I think that will help. I'd like now to throw over to some Q&A, Alexi and Hudson. I think this will be really, really good. I'll just put up the MECLA feedback, Hudson, so that people can scan that. That'll take you to a feedback, which is going to be, and I want to thank MECLA very much for this, Hudson, and your leadership here. It'll take everyone back to a Google Doc, which MECLA has very generously agreed to incorporate all the comments that come back and provide a consolidated position back to ABAB, which we really appreciate. Hudson, thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And Teresa, maybe if Teresa also puts her camera on, I can see several comments in the chat, and we do have a question in the Q&A. I'd really encourage our attendees. Now's a terrific time. We've got 90 people online. Let's make the most of Andrew and Teresa's time and expertise. We've got them available now. So if you have questions, for yourself or from your organisation or more generally. My observation, Andrew, is MECLA talks about systems change and the ecosystem of the construction world. You've touched on multiple points, but then the enablers of, and that key message of you can't decarbonise without digital, I think came through loud and clear. The thought that digital literacy, though, might be lacking. I was wondering if you could just flesh out what does that mean. I've got grey hair. My kids think I'm really old, and my digital literacy isn't too bad, but I'm also not a digital native. But there are professionals of an earlier generation, in the workforce as well. We all live longer, so work longer, and then there are, lots of younger professionals coming through. When you say lack of literacy, what does that actually mean?
Hudson, for me, it really means valuing data,
Hmm.
right? And it's that might sound very simple, but it's also very complex.
Yep.
So in the organisations I worked in, and I'm sure others have too, there hasn't been a focus on valuing data and thinking about how data, particularly around projects, is going to be handed over to the operators and maintainers. And that challenge is that you've probably heard this through your working career as I have, the data gets created in silos through the design process, moves over into the construction process, and then gets reinvented or re-examined in the operations process, and then
Hmm.
examined again in the maintenance. And we're not capturing the data across the entire life cycle. So something that's identified in the design process, delivered in the construction process, doesn't get utilised in the operations and maintenance process. So that's what I guess, broadly talking about when I talk about digital literacy, right? It's incumbent upon all of us to be thinking about how the data we're generating in projects is going to be used across the life cycle. So that's why it's a cultural change piece as well, that we
Hmm.
need leadership from government and also from industry to value data, to say that this is going to be used across the life cycle. So how do you ensure that the data that you are creating can be well managed, can be curated, and can be used in another 5, 10, 15 years' time? Now, AI, I'm sure, is going to play an enormous role in this, but we're not going to just let AI run wild and it'll be fine. AI will look after it. How do
Yep.
we manage and curate and direct AI to assist us? Right? How are we going to embed into roles into the future that data management, data literacy, digital literacy is very important in all the roles in the infrastructure and construction sectors. So that's when I talk about data literacy, and it's a really good question, Hudson.
Mm.
That's the challenge that I sort of see for us as collectively as industry members,
Yep.
about how we can use it more effectively, how we can value it, and how we can ensure that when we are passing the information on downstream, that others can use the information effectively to undertake their roles.
Terrific. Before we go on, I just want to point out to our audience that Alexi behind the scenes has put a link to the discussion paper in the chat, but please put your questions into the Q&A field. Just continuing with the digital literacy, I'd like to go to Teresa and then come back to you, Andrew. Teresa, from a government point of view, how do you see government departments, government procurement teams, agencies, how are they tracking in terms of digital literacy?
Good question, but I might just jump back a little bit to your first question. The literacy also comes through and needs to be embedded into the education pathways.
Right.
We're no longer, is it a bolt-on? It should
Mhm.
be embedded in that training and across all the sectors in construction, engineering through to project management and all of the others and through this supply chain. So part of that literacy will be grown if we can get it into individuals' learning journey and the qualifications. It can be embedded into the undergrads, but also through apprenticeships. I mean, with the use of drones and things like that, it's across all of the sector. How are we seeing government departments? It's really a little bit of that homegrown, where a department who is more advanced in digital enablement in mega or large-scale projects, excuse me, they are starting to bring in that expertise. And then, of course, that expertise is shared across the teams, and there's that development and knowledge gaining through working with those that are experts in the area. It's very much a case of not one size fits all. It depends on the size of the project. It depends on the size of the organisation and where you sit within that life cycle. Depends on the need or the proficiency around digital literacy. But in response to that, again, I go back to government departments. It would be nice to see more, but if we can start it through the education, then it's built in at that entry point into whether you're coming into construction on site or whether you're coming into a government agency. It's there and part of your qualification. So I just round that comment up by saying that it is part of that mentoring and growing with exposure within the government department. Of course, there are some government agencies who have in-house training, and there are others that are a little bit watch and see, and they're growing it organically through practice.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What I wanted to ask you, Andrew, and by all means, Teresa, chip in, but the link between a couple of those challenges, the piece about digital skills, but then the next one about the small medium enterprise participation. We know we've got a housing crisis. We have a lack of supply. A lot of housing is built by very small businesses.
Yep.
But cumulatively, they deliver a lot. If we are to have, a digital passport for residential construction, how do we bring trades along, not just, the white collar professionals, but the blue collar people who build our homes? How do we bring them on this digital journey?
Well, Hudson, I think it goes back to your earlier comment about your kids and probably my kids who are, late 20s, early 30s. Mine are, I'm not talking about yours,
Not there yet.
who've grown up, in this environment where smartphones, data at their fingertips has been very much what they are used to, and their contemporaries are used to. And the apprentices coming through now are expecting to see information on a smartphone or on a tablet, not necessarily on a whiteboard or a sheet of paper that might get blown away on the worksite, right?
Yep.
So they're wanting to use those digital tools that they have enjoyed through their entire life so far into their workplace. So I think that, and with the introduction of AI, I think they're also seeing that there are shortcuts, if you like, or opportunities, right? Now, there will be hopefully some wise heads saying, yeah, great to have the AI, but let's just keep managing, let's keep directing, let's keep ensuring that the AI is working with us, not taking us in another direction. So I think that we will see over time, the industry take up around digital will continue to grow and will continue to be embraced as those young people now who are in the workforce, who have finished their apprenticeships, who are starting their own businesses, will use digital more effectively than even I've ever considered could be used. Recently we had a quote for some solar panels. The guy that came out, a lovely young man, had an iPad, had a drone. He didn't need to go up onto the roof to check the angles of the roof. He had Google Maps to look at the information. He used the drone just to do a little bit of on-site investigation, and he was using all of it at his fingertips. Where previously someone would have turned up, mate, you got a ladder? Oh, where are we going to put it? Oh, have you got a safety point? Oh, okay, it's all right. Can you just hold the base while I get up on the roof and have a look?
Yeah.
So I think that people, the younger generations coming through today, are more aware of the technology and how it can assist or support them. And I think the SMEs, in time, we will see a transformation of the way that they undertake their work, because they will be used to it and not concerned about it, and we'll be prepared to have a go. And if they get it wrong, we'll just keep going until we get it right.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And nice practical example there. One of the questions is about examples. I'll come to that in a moment, but an earlier question really was asking about this strategy, but operating in the environment where there's suggestions to pause the National Construction Code development. How do you navigate that policy complexity?
That's a really good question, Hudson. And I think the challenge there is at some point the pause will get lifted, right? And then we will need to ensure that Australia's not left behind, or people aren't left behind, as work gets underway. I think it's a bit like saying, and I've heard this, do we pause the electric vehicle rollout in Australia for the next 5 or 10 years while we sort of catch up, because we're a little bit overwhelmed by it at the moment? Is that something we want to do? Are we going to pause the rollout of smartphone technology because we're just stuck a little bit, and we just want to, we don't want to really get ahead of ourselves? Are those the sort of things we're going to do? So in the national construction area, there's that challenge around, what does a pause look like? What are the implications? I think ABAB needs to ensure that we are ready for the conversation if a pause
Yep.
is taken, and what we are going to do and how we're going to do it. I'm sure Teresa's got a whole lot of views as well.
A push to digitalisation, though, is this going to be an additional cost, or is it an efficiency gain there for a cost saving, do you think?
I'd like to suggest that it's not going to be an added cost.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the challenge that we have faced in a lot of the conversation is, particularly during the 2010s, was that the work we were seeing from the UK and others was suggesting there were going to be huge benefits and a lot of savings. And some of those savings perhaps didn't materialize as effectively as we were hoping, because we put much more into our projects, right? Because we could. So it's how we de-risk projects by having digital in the process. It's how we provide confidence to governments and to industry that we can actually count the carbon more effectively by having a digital approach. So I'm not suggesting that there isn't a cost. There is a cost, but there is a cost to everything we do. But that's not a reason not to do it. It's just reducing the risk, in my view, and providing good quality data and information to ensure that we get good outcomes.
Teresa, you're being very patient and have your hand up.
I just wanted to speak to the NCC. I don't see them necessarily dependent upon each other. The NCC is the minimum standard, so focus on compliance, health and safety, etc. Digitalisation is the enabler that makes decarbonisation measurable and achievable. We can actually implement digitalisation without waiting for the NCC to catch up. So I don't see them quite the same. In the second question around cost, It was really interesting when I first started to look at BIM, even before ABAB was established. The major project at the time implemented, was one of the first in Australia that implemented BIM, and it was probably one of the first mega projects in Australia that actually came in on time and on budget, very much attributable to the fact that they used BIM and they could manage those two things throughout the construction. So one could say, yes, there's upfront costs, but if you bring a project, a government project, in on time and budget, you'll save that cost multiple times.
Yep. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I've just realised my camera has stopped working. Speaking of digital, not sure what's going wrong there. I'd like to say it's not my lack of digital capability, but it may well be me that stuffed that up. Apologies, everyone. I hope you can still hear me though, Andrew and Teresa.
Certainly can.
Yep, great. Okay, I've got a face for radio, so let's just keep going. How do you see, so this discussion paper that you've put forward, I braced myself, I sat down with a big cup of tea to read it and found, oh, this is actually very easy to read. This is nice and clear. Who's the audience? What's the objective? I really encourage our audience today to all download and read it. But what are you seeking to achieve? I guess we're all industry insiders and look at this and go, oh, this is our world. Yep, this makes sense. Yep, agree with that. Or what about this? But ultimately, why has ABAB put its minds together to deliver this?
I think, Hudson, obviously it's government, right? And it also needs to be industry, but we didn't want it to be an enormous tome that governments or industry would look at and go, oh, we can't bother reading this, right? There's just too involved, and ABAB's been clear throughout its existence that it's not got all the silver bullets and here's the wisdom according to ABAB, and this is what you need to do, because we recognise that governments and industry have made investment decisions around technology, around approaches, and you need to build on those, or you need to amend those over time, and that takes time. And also, there's a certain amount of investment that's been made, and Hudson, you recognise this. There's careers that have been made by chief information officers about the approach they're taking and why the organisation needs to invest the way it has. And it's really hard to undo that as an organisation which is made up of government members who are all working very effectively to seek to influence and to encourage and to identify elements that that industry and government, the government departments can embrace, but also that industry can review and consider as well. It also fits with APCC and ASIF's mandates, and that's where we get our support from, and we want to ensure that we work with government and industry effectively.
Yep.
Teresa.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to the question, sorry about my cough, the question from Robert around the SMEs. We're very, as government and clients, and government's been one of the major client in the construction industry, what is put into our procurement and our requirements will impact the whole industry. We're very conscious about what we say and do and its impact on the SMEs. Government doesn't do non-residential except for, residential except for public housing. But nevertheless, what we are trying to do is sort of start to send those signals that digital enablement in the construction sector will eventually become business as usual, but we won't do it overnight. We just don't throw it out there and expect everyone to pivot and change and address it very, very quickly. So we are slow. What our challenge is moving it from our large-scale projects into business as usual. And anyone out there with any thoughts on how government can drive digital enablement and all the efficiencies that come with that from large-scale projects, which it's starting to become business as usual, down into some of those smaller ones, which have more of an impact on your mums and dad type organisations. So that goes to that. There was another question in there that I wanted to pick up. There's no name on it, but it was the issue around it's value engineered out. And that probably goes to support why digitalisation is important in the decarbonisation agenda. Because once you start that measuring and reporting through the digital tools, you can't value engineer it out, not in a government anyway, because it's brought into the procurement contract. So you've got that, you have that loop back where government can do that auditing and make sure what they said they were going to deliver in terms of decarbonisation is actually delivered, because we can measure it through the digitalisation. So I hope that answers that question.
Yep, that makes sense. Hey, one of the questions, Rachel Stewart's asked the question. She's the co-chair of our working group on data and measurement. And the question about timeframes, that 2029 seems to be a long way off. Why has that year been selected, Andrew, for implementation? Can you comment on that?
I think that was an endpoint rather than an implementation timeframe. It was to provide some direction, if you like, to industry that, as Teresa said, it's not going to have to pivot today to then start implementing from tomorrow, right? So we need to have some guidance along there. Again, if MECLA thinks it's too far in the future, certainly we're wanting to hear that. There's been some conversation within ABAB and through the consultation we've done that maybe we should be aiming for 26 or 27. Given that we're 3/4 of the way through 25, I think a 26 or 27 timeframe gets a bit tight. Should we be aiming for a 28 timeframe, 29? That's a really good question, and it's not. We're not fixated on the 29 timeframe, but I think that it'd be good to hear some. And the challenge, I guess, Hudson, is we don't want to then try and stress governments and industry that the timeframe is too short, because the adoption rate will be too low.
Yes. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think you touched on something there that aligned with Teresa's comment about the NCC saying, look, that's the minimum.
Yep.
It's not saying we don't start until then, or we start at the minimum. You can always go sooner or go higher.
Correct. And and it's that, whatever date you put in, the reader will go, oh, that seems like it's too far in the future, or oh no, we can't possibly do that because we won't be ready.
Yeah.
So there's always that challenge or that tension that we need to iron out.
Can I ask about the international context? So there are some areas where Australia sees itself as a real leader. There are other times when people come back from working overseas and say, "Oh my gosh, we're behind." Or what's the rest of the developed world doing in this space? Are there fantastic examples where you could say, "Gosh, what they're doing in the Netherlands or in Canada or somewhere else is amazing"? What have you found?
So in the research for this, there are, and no surprises here, varying degrees of take up. And it depends very much on how economies and governments are wanting to decarbonise their economies. So that is reflective of work underway across the entire sectors in those various jurisdictions. The US and the UK, US up until recently had pockets which was going much quicker than others. The UK has certainly been a leader in this, looking at decarbonisation, as has the EU, right? There are other economies which are lagging, what we call as, or I'd suggest as probably lagging a little bit on some of the timeframes. But it depends very much on the governments and where they see the urgency around this. And as well, Hudson, it's those investment opportunities that will come through the decarbonisation process. Whether it's presented by government and industry as a blocker or an enabler. And I think that's where the opportunities will get taken up, where people see it as an enabler for innovation, for future growth and future development.
Fantastic. Teresa, do you have any comments there on who's doing this well and who's applying BIM well?
Look, as Andrew said, there are some, Estonia was one that we had presented just recently, which was fantastic. So happy to share that example with the audience. We have to be careful how I say this. In Australia, we have the challenge of no single government to lead the way, because we live in a federated country, and that in some cases slows down our progress. But having said that, there are examples in Australia where we have leading agencies, and they have gifted a lot of their work to the other governments, and that supports driving national consistency, and also the uptake, make it easier for some of the smaller agencies or governments to learn from the leading agencies. But I think in Australia, we do have that issue of we're federated, and it makes it difficult for industry and for government. We don't have that economies of scale when you look at a single jurisdiction to drive change and enable the uptake of BIM in a short period of time.
Right. Now, I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes to go. Can I ask, we'll be sending, I've just had a message from Alexi, we'll be sending an email to all of our registered attendees, reminding them of the link to the feedback form and the paper itself, obviously. But what's your call to action, Andrew? One about I guess two things I'd ask you about the paper, but also about digitalisation. What do you want people to do in their work life, apart from fill in the form and give your feedback?
I guess, Hudson, they're two really good questions. I want people to be valuing data and looking at the opportunities that it can provide downstream. So thinking about how the data that they're going to collect in the jobs they do can improve opportunities downstream from the work they're doing. Now, that's always a challenge because organisations, businesses, government departments are very focused on the here and now and what they need. They're not a lot of people think about how can we help or improve opportunities downstream. But that's one thing that I think we could all do better, is value data and think about how the data that we are capturing is going to be used to improve asset outcomes across the life cycle of the asset.
Okay, that makes sense. Good homework for everybody. Teresa, what's your call to action?
Oh, look, I'll be a little bit bold, and I think it's that, I'm still in somebody else's quote, but digital by default. Go with digital first, start small and scale up, but think digital first and then work that through and then grow over time.
Fantastic. All right. Well, look, that makes a lot of sense. Apologies that we haven't got through all of the questions. As a facilitator, I would rather have too many than too few, though. So I think it's a mark of engagement that people are genuinely interested in this. So to the audience, thank you for joining in. Please scan this QR code, have a look at the links, check the email, and do provide your feedback. To Andrew, Teresa, and Dominique in the background, thank you very much for preparing this, for putting yourselves out there and presenting it. But fundamentally, thanks for leading this work. I can really see the value as systems thinkers working on the construction ecosystem to bring decarbonisation onto a Paris-aligned trajectory. Clearly, without digital, we're not going to do it. So I think I'm going to adopt that mantra, Andrew. Thank you very much. To Alexi Barnstone behind the scenes from a MECLA point of view, Alexi at Climate Kick, mate, thank you for all of your work pulling this together. That's great. To Kati Verheyen and Monica Richter, also in the MECLA Secretariat, thank you to all of your work in making events like this happen. For now, we're bang on time. Thank you, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you in the next MECLA event. Cheers.
Thank you, Hudson.
Thank you.
Thank you all.